Thank you all again so much for coming to visit with us. I think this is going to be a really exciting presentation for us because maybe many of us don't know much about this artist compared to maybe some of the few that we have done before. And I want to start by asking you, what is your personal connection with Vermeer? Why are you connected with them? How did you get interested in Vermeer in the first place?
Yeah, so my first connection with Vermeer was in seventh grade when I was in my school library, Richlands Middle School in the mountains of Southwest Virginia. Uh, Probably every school in America has this book. It was a collection, Time Life books.
Anybody remember Time Life books, right? Are we old enough? Okay.
Yeah, like the world of Giotto, the world of Rembrandt, the world of Vermeer. And in this little slip-cased book, I read about this world that was totally foreign. Um, I was in the mountains, and this is a country, born of the sea, below sea level. And I read about the gunpowder explosion in Delft, Vermeer's hometown. Um, yeah, it was just this strange and wonderful world.
Well, being an English teacher, I love that it was a book that got you hooked. So everybody read. That's important, right? So, but is there anything else that connected you with Vermeer personally?
Well, toward the end of this book, there was a chapter on Han van Meegeren. And van Meegeren was a forger, like Vermeer's grandfather, but we'll get to that, I suppose. So Van Meegeren wasn't a great painter himself, but he forged Vermeers and forged other paintings too, sold them to the Nazis. Well, that kind of got him in trouble because Dutch government thought that he was selling Dutch national treasures to the Nazis, and so he was arrested for treason. So rather than be shot, he confessed to forgery, notably lesser charge. But of course, they didn't believe him, so they made him paint a forgery under gunpoint, or not under gunpoint, but under guard. In order to prove that they were actually forgeries. So for a Cold War chemistry nerd, would-be artist, that was just crack.
Yeah, a lot of intrigue. Who wouldn't be interested in that? Well, I remember you telling me also that you were taken on a trip to see a Vermeer. So can you tell us about that?
Yeah, my first painting teacher took me to the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., and I saw a woman holding a balance, or I think at the time she was still called Woman Weighing Gold. And it just struck me how realistic she looked. I was in eighth grade. That was the first thing that struck my eye, was how representational, how, for lack of a better word, photoreal. And I know better now. I know that that's not what he was doing. But then when I saw her a few years later, I realized what he was doing compositionally, how he was structuring the painting. Light, dark, and the wonderful transitions between those. And then years later, when I started teaching humanities, teaching art history, I saw the whole Protestant Reformation play out in this little painting. And we see clues. We see the scales that are empty. There's no gold in those scales. She's not weighing gold. So if she's not weighing something physical, she must be weighing something metaphysical, right? And so there's a clue to that too. We see in the background, we see a Last Judgment painting, a very Catholic image. And so then we see to the left a mirror, noting that she's being introspective. She's looking into her own soul. And perhaps considering the soul of her unborn child, born into original sin. There's a lot to unpack in this. It's not just a woman by a window. It's never just a woman by a window. And to carry on that conversation, I feel like Vermeer and I have had this conversation for years and across the centuries, and I've made my own painting that was a response to Vermeer's Woman Holding a Balance. Some of the same elements are there. The child, the scales, the question of riches, Vermeer's woman is clearly well off. She's wearing ermine, which would have been incredibly expensive. And in my painting, she's wearing a hoodie, machine embroidered, but undoubtedly under slave labor conditions in Bangladesh. And the question of morality and riches, I think that's the crux of both of our paintings.
Well, I think it's so interesting that your story is interconnected with Vermeer's and the Dutch, and it's even inspired your own art, as we saw. You mentioned learning about Vermeer in the book, The World of Vermeer, earlier. So what can you tell us that may not know about the world of Vermeer? What should we know about that? I hear even there's some drama in his life story, so that's always fun.
So Vermeer was born toward the end of the 80 Years' War with Spain. Vermeer would have been an adolescent when the war ended. So he was born into troubling times geopolitically. But also his family, his grandfather, as I said, was a forger. His father fought with knives in public, was not the most stand-up citizen. And then he marries Katerina Bolness, whose family was just as bad. Her father, Katerina's father and mother were estranged because her father was abusive. Katerina's brother was in prison for assault. It just goes on. And then I feel like Vermeer worked hard to achieve peace in his paintings. This painting was just down the street from his aunt's house, and who knows what trouble that street saw. We don't see any of it here.
Well, since his life was so turbulent, do we see that reflected in a lot of his art? Or you mentioned peace, so how did that work?
I feel like Vermeer's peace is hard won in his work. We don't see things like Nicholas Maas here. Vermeer doesn't take joy in the humiliation of a servant like was common in Dutch painting. He doesn't show us any kind of domestic intrigue like this other Maas painting. He doesn't show us the game of footsie and the drinking game that's not so sort of sexual. He doesn't show us the bawdy party where someone's getting pickpocketed and someone else is not getting pickpocketed. So
his contemporaries had a lot of points of view about the serving class. Apparently.
Yeah, absolutely. And the immigrant was suspect. The lower class, the one not from here was often the brunt of the joke. The one looked down upon. And Vermeer doesn't engage in that.
So what were some of the themes of his work then instead, since he didn't do it like these other gentlemen did?
Yeah, so another Jan Steen we'll look at here. And there's one symbol that I want you to pay attention to. This little box that the woman's foot rests on in the foreground. There's a wooden box perforated at the top with a clay crucible in the middle with coals. And so that would warm under the woman's dress. And you don't have to have much imagination to imagine the symbol that means, right? That's always a symbol of lust and lasciviousness in every other painting I've ever seen from the period, except Vermeer. Vermeer acknowledges the symbol. This is Vermeer's painting on the left. We can see the milkmaid. He acknowledges that symbol and at the very same brushstroke denies its meaning. He shows us a woman that's about her work. She's doing her job. Let her be. Yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting that he seemed to have high esteem for women and take care of them more in his paintings as a major focal point. He even ended up with a really interesting nickname, did he not? Because of some of this.
Yeah, Vermeer doesn't give us the whole story. He suggests with symbol or the rejection of symbol, but he was that way in his life too. He didn't leave copious writings to interpret, to pore over. Um, there are only 37 paintings if you're generous. So there was not a lot to find, to rediscover in Vermeer's work. So there was one researcher, writer, wrote for the Salon, Thorberger, and he rediscovered Vermeer in the 1860s and called him the Sphinx of Delft because there was just so little to find. He was mysterious.
Well, we love a mystery, right? So you mentioned he rediscovered him in the 1900s, or the 19th century rather. How was his art received in his day? And if it wasn't received well then how did we get to where we are now?
Vermeer was well received by his patrons, well respected by his peers. He was twice elected the head man of the Guild of St. Luke, the Painters Guild. So,
Good name. Good name.
Yeah. Side job for you. But
I'm working on my sainthood still, so you know.
2 miracles, is that what you mean?
Well, we're working on our first one. So.
Yeah, he was well respected all around. It's just he had kind of a perfect storm of anti-fame. He didn't have a large studio with workshops, workshop assistants. He didn't have many students. He was not prolific. He had 11 children, 7 whom lived to adulthood.
So he was busy.
He was busy. He was busy. He was an innkeeper.
It's a lot of kids to keep up with.
He was an innkeeper. He was an art dealer. In that way, he was like his father. But he had a lot going on. He was not a printmaker, so he didn't make prints like Rembrandt. Rembrandt made hundreds of prints that were widely distributed in Europe. And Vermeer's work doesn't really translate to print. You know, this beautiful painting, an earlier rediscover of Vermeer tried to reproduce it in line art, and it just doesn't take. It lacks all the tonality. It lacks all the nuance of Vermeer. Vermeer really had to wait. He had to wait on the technology of photography to catch up. He had and mezzotint, aquatint; those had not been invented yet either. So there was no real way to reproduce Vermeer's light in books or prints. And add to that, Vermeer's patrons, though they were rich and loyal, they weren't celebrities. So he wasn't going to get a lot of fame through that. The Dutch Republic didn't patronize artists in the way other countries did. And he was Catholic, but he did not paint large altar pieces. And in Protestant Netherlands, wouldn't have gotten notoriety for that anyway. Yeah. So it wasn't that he was a bad painter. Yeah. It's just that he had those strikes against him for fame.
Well, I think that's interesting in contrast to some of the ones, for those of you that have been to some of our other art mixers, thinking about like Sargent painting people that were very well known in his day, and that helped add to his notoriety and kind of give him a positive momentum. And you see the contrast, or having the force of the church behind his paintings or other things. So, well, what are some other notable works that are famous or that you find personally compelling? I know that you said there's only 37, so there's not a lot to choose from.
There's not a lot. We could probably look at every one tonight, but we won't. You know, we talk a lot about the space Vermeer creates, and we usually talk about the one little room that he paints in that one little corner of, you know, and that being the space he creates. But I'm really interested in the space he creates for people, and particularly the space he creates for women, where other painters, as we've seen, might use women as props or as devices in telling another kind of story. Vermeer lets them tell their own story or keep as much to themselves as they want. Vermeer lets there be space to be. And we see in this painting, we see the male figure virtually disappear. We see the male figure here having distance from the woman. And we can see the reflection of the woman in the mirror here. And Vermeer initially painted her looking toward the male figure. Notice the perspective doesn't line up. Like she's looked back to her work. She's looked back to her instrument. So there's that acknowledgement and rejection. We see in this one, clearly the male is still courting. You know, the male is, he's all about the courtship. And she looks at us as though to acknowledge the absurdity of the whole situation.
Ladies, you've all been there, right?
Right. And I love that. And then in Girl Interrupted, she breaks the fourth wall. Not uncommon, but very conscious.
It's like she's saying seriously.
Right. Yeah. But Vermeer's most iconic works are the single figure by a window. And here we see Vermeer's Woman with Water Pitcher from the Met. Here, she's looking outside. She has the window open. She's looking out to another world. It's not this one little room. It's a place that we can't see. In some ways, maybe it's a place she can't see. Although women in the Dutch Republic and in the Golden Age enjoyed many freedoms, they could hold personal property, they could divorce, great freedoms, but still there was the understanding that a married woman and a maid would be, her place would be the home. And in this painting, we see that her place, she's looking to a place where she's not bound by that. So in the first one we looked at, woman holding a balance, she's looking internal. She's looking to herself and her spirituality. In the Milkmaid, she's about her work, the present moment. And then in the Water Pitcher, she's looking outside to another place and perhaps another time. But perhaps Vermeer's most iconic work, all that falls away, and we see just the woman, not a portrait. This would have been, this is called a trony, not intended to be a portrait of an individual person, but a type. Right? She's not in a room. This is a space without time, without place. It's this liminal space. We see her. We meet her eyes. She turns. We're speechless, both of us. I remember the first time I saw this painting was at the High Museum when the Mauritshuis was undergoing some renovation. The Mauritshuis is where it usually is in Den Haag. And there were a number of scholars there. I was part of a symposium, and the lecturer said, "You studio people will know what I mean. There's a moment when you're painting and the painting looks back." She's as alive as anyone I've ever seen. A far better painting than the Mona Lisa, with all respect to Da Vinci. This is often called the Mona Lisa of the North, which I think does a great disservice to Vermeer.
Well, and this is the one that we probably recognize the most.
And the pearl,
Yeah.
right? Like it's so delicately painted. There's two strokes that describe the pearl. It's more suggested than described.
Mm-hmm. Well, that has shown us a lot. No, leave that up because I love where we're going next with this. So I bet you can't guess based on that picture. So, you talked earlier about how you were having a conversation with Vermeer, which I really loved the idea of you having and being in a continual conversation with Vermeer through your own art and just through your study of him. What made you want to do this particularly with Vermeer, and what have you learned through this conversation?
Yeah, I think when I first visited the Netherlands, my now wife Nicole and I went in 2019. There were some things that just really stood out. I mean, I knew certain connections with, as I read history, connections of family. I was born into a violent family where religion would be both comfort, refuge, but also rejection. there was a lot there, a lot of similarity,
Yeah.
even though there were centuries and many, many miles apart. And then when we traveled to the Netherlands, other things kind of stood out. Corn wine is really moonshine. It's kind of the same thing.
Now we're speaking our language, right?
Bitterballen is deep fried gravy, and really houseboats on a canal. It's a lot like a trailer park.
Yeah. So these are familiar things.
Yeah.
When we are from around here. Yeah. Well, I think it's so amazing when we can find points of connection with artists, even when we are centuries apart. And I don't know how many of you have had that kind of experience. I know that I feel like I have, when it's almost like an artist is talking to me through what they're painting. I can't even imagine, because I'm not artistically gifted, to be able to have that conversation back and trying to replicate themes or things like that. But as we kind of close our time out together, what do you hope that we remember about Vermeer or take away about him as a painter?
Yeah, I think Vermeer, though he may be the Sphinx of Delft, he's not unknowable.
Mhm.
And the more we peel back the layers, the more connection we can have.
Mhm.
And that's true for any of us, but also the great artists.
Yeah.
Incidentally, I proposed to my wife in Delft.
I mean, so another point of connection, which is great.
Of course, we celebrate with corn wine.
Yeah.
And stroopwafel.
Yeah, stroopwafel. I can't forget that. That stuff's great. Well, we always like to close out by saying, if we're interested in seeing Vermeer's art, where can we see it? I do want to mention really quickly, I don't know if any of you all saw this, but ironically, it was like a gift today from the heavens. So thank you. But there was an article in the New York Times talking about how the Frick Museum is reopening because they've been through a massive renovation, and they have a beautiful Vermeer there that actually you had, and it was the lady in the yellow that had the fur trim. And that is there at the Frick in New York City that you can visit now and just opened. And then also there's a special exhibit coming in June called Vermeer's Love Letters. So how about that for timing that we just found out about? And so if you're going to be in New York, I know that's one place that I was really excited to see that today, this morning. But where else can we find his work? I know there's not a lot.
Yeah, unfortunately, you just missed a big one. There was the big Vermeer show, 28 of his pieces at the Rijksmuseum in 2023.
What's going on over here, though?
Well, the bus broke down on the way.
Oh no!
So I'm terrified. I'm on my phone looking to see if will Uber pick me up on a Dutch highway.
Didn't you have a time ticket that you
we
had
had
to
time
get there?
tickets. I bought tickets months and months ahead.
Yeah.
30 euros or so, which was a bargain at twice the price. But being a time ticket, they were up to thousands of dollars, and just unavailable. So if you don't get in, you don't get in. But my wife, being the type she is, had built in plenty of time in case something went wrong. So that's why she's smiling.
She's like, it's okay, we're gonna get there.
We ended up getting there 5 minutes before our time.
Yeah.
So
So you're drenched in sweat when you're in this room. So
so this is the Rijksmuseum. This is where you can see some Vermeers at any time you like to go.
And that's in Amsterdam.
It's in
correct?
Amsterdam. Yeah. I really, Amsterdam is great. The Netherlands in general, you'll get to see Vermeer in his not his town, but in his country, and that's important. But if you can't get to Amsterdam, certainly the Frick in New York, go see The Woman Holding a Balance, my first love. Go see her in DC.
In the National Gallery, correct?
Yeah, the National Gallery.
Okay. All right. Well, we really appreciate your time here today. I know that Perry will be up here if you have any other questions. We were really lucky that this final painting is actually in Vienna, and so we got to see that over Christmas break. And
we saw it over spring break.
Yeah, so ironically, both of us have gotten to see this within the last year, which is pretty incredible. Yeah. So lots of great places to go travel and explore and see, but some domestically as well. So please enjoy the rest of your evening, talk with each other, ask questions if you would like. Please go get more food and drink and enjoy time together. But thank you for coming today.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you.